Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're on the submarine USS Cod in Cleveland, and we're going to talk about how submariners had better food even than battleship sailors. I'm here with my counterpart, Paul Faraci, and he's going to run us through the menu of what you can get on a submarine.
Absolutely. By the way, I have to tell you, it's a great honor to have you and your entourage on board, Cod. It's well known that submarines had really great chow because they weren't getting Bob Hope USO tours on submarines.
Wait, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders never came on your ship?
No. We did have one bagpiper who couldn't really play Amazing Grace. The Navy was very focused on providing the best food and a whole lot of amenities on submarines to keep morale up because submariners were considered so vital to the war effort. So when the early supply lines were being stood up early in the war from the United States to Australia, some of the boats were facing a serious challenge on providing the crews with good food. The early war patrols out of Brisbane, they were having to feed mutton to the crews, and sometimes not fresh mutton. And so it was really a challenge, and I think that was provided an important lesson to the Navy. So they really kicked up the effort to provide the best food for submarines as quickly as possible. So on a patrol on a submarine, you had breakfast, which was a hearty breakfast. You could have cereal if you wanted, but it was always something heavy, greasy, and involved a lot of eggs and bacon. Although I'm told that the fresh eggs would last maybe 3 weeks before you had to use the powdered eggs. And the cooks told me that they would be very careful to preserve the shells of the last dozen eggs or so, and they would keep them in a bowl that would be visible in the galley to the crew coming through so that they would think they're getting fresh eggs when in fact it's powdered eggs. Then you had dinner.
Wait, what kind did you feed us this morning?
It came in a can, and it was from 1958. The label kind of wore off. I'm not sure. Was it eggs?
You said green eggs and ham.
Yeah, well, the ham was green. Yeah, but anyway, you had dinner, and then in the evening you had a lighter supper. There was no lunch. Well, I mean, lunch was any time you wanted to grab a slab of meat and carve it with some bread. But George Sacco was one of our cooks. We've got a little homage to George. This is George in the galley. We know that picture was taken sometime from the midnight to 4 a.m. watch because he's baking bread. The mid-watch is when they baked. And George was a commercial baker. Now, understood, he's one of many cooks on the Cod, but he's the one we talked to. He's the one who's photographed. So, by the way, the bread, when it came out of the oven, it smelled great, they say. And, of course, you're also doing sticky buns and sweet rolls. But those things have to cool down, and you don't want to leave them out here where you've got guys hungry for mid-rats, which is a Cold War era thing. So one of the 8 benches in here, always the bench closest to the hatch here, is the bread locker. It has air ventilation holes on the side. So George would fill that, and then they had to convert one of the general lockers into an auxiliary bread locker. Yep. And you didn't want to have the crew touching that stuff, so you had to lock it. But food on the Cod was good, as it was on all the boats. But there were some challenges. I know Navy floats on coffee, and very early in the war, the guys, the bean counters in Washington, realized that every month they're shipping more than 1 million pounds of coffee to the Pacific. And that takes up quite a bit of space. Well, 1 million pounds, you're only using a tiny, less than 1% of that is the coffee liqueur that makes the coffee. And you're dumping 1 million pounds of grounds. So somebody came up with a brilliant idea. Let's serve this newfangled instant coffee, Nescafe. It's 100% coffee and there's no grounds. So sometime in late 43, early 44, significant amounts of Nescafe show up into the submarine fleet in particular. And George Sacco told me that, it was not well accepted by the crew. And in fact, they were refusing to drink it. And he had a problem, and so did our supply officer, because the traditional coffee is very limited. Mm-hmm. And so they literally pulled rank. They said, submariners. So we did get as much traditional coffee grounds. But Nescafe did gain acceptance because a lot of these guys had Australian girlfriends and friends who were drinking something made out of chicory and paint chips. And Nescafe was a godsend. So suddenly, send us more Nescafe, because a lot of it is going off the boat on leave. But, so there's our menu. It's interesting that there are some days where the cooks are taking it easy. And like, for instance, on Sunday night, it's just cold cuts and soup. Well, that's because Rope Yarn Sunday, everybody's cleaning their workspaces Sunday evenings on the boat. We did find out from one of our crewmen that the cooks would do the ship's laundry, but he couldn't remember what night of the week that was. But looking at George's menu, I realized Wednesday nights, it's hot dogs. So that tells me Wednesday night they're doing the laundry. So, but of course, the enlisted men are drinking their coffee out of the classic handleless coffee mug, which these were made by the tens of millions, particularly here in Ohio, down along the southern border with West Virginia. This is a sterling china. These look very simple, and of course they're used by the Army and Air Force, the Coast Guard, and prisons. It looks really simple, but it's kind of high tech, because we did some tests. If you pour hot coffee in this, heavy ceramic mug, it will cool the coffee down just enough so it's drinkable, but it just has incredible thermal, capabilities. It will stay hot very long. I mean, you'd have to get one of these special high-tech Yeti coffee things to rival what this can do. And for historian friends who know all about the anti-submarine warfare scene in the Atlantic, these were used as a weapon to subdue a U-boat crew on one battle.
So, tell me about the most important meal of the day. Dessert.
Well, George Sacco tells me that he loved to bake cakes, and he would often create the batter and put it in a pan and put it in the oven to rise. But he said it's almost as if the diving officer was keeping an eye on what he's doing, because every time they put the cake batter in the oven, the boat would dive. So it would set up 3 inches on one end of the pan and 1 inch on the other pan. And, he said he couldn't make enough frosting to level that out. So instead of having a one-layer cake, he just had 2 and would flip them so that you had ultimately an even cake. But we never heard a complaint about any of our cooks.
Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. Consider supporting the ongoing restoration of USS Cod. Their donation link is in the description below, as is a link to their YouTube channel if you want to learn more about Cod's history. You can support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and our museum. Thanks for watching.